A major escalation in the war on Ukraine. Vladimir Putin illegally declared around 40,000 square miles of eastern and southern Ukraine as part of Russia. Experts say it is the largest land grab since World War II. The U.S. and allies responded by slapping a new round of sanctions on Russian government officials and their families. Here is President Biden.
Putin's actions are a sign he's struggling. The United States is never going to recognize this. And quite frankly, the world's not going to recognize it either. He can't seize his neighbor's territory and get away with it. It's as simple as that. America is fully prepared with our NATO allies to defend every single inch of NATO territory.
Perhaps more concerning, during Putin's unhinged speech, he accused the U.S. of creating a, quote, precedent for using nuclear weapons by bombing Japan. Fears of nuclear war have grown since Putin said last week he was not bluffing when it comes to using nukes to defend his territory. Dana, I want to come to you first on this. It feels like more than just an escalation. Like, we use that term all the time, but this is really a departure from where we've been.
What you would say is you'd call it a step change, I believe, like not just an escalation. So a couple of things. I was able to talk to some folks that I trust on this, and they think that this is the most dangerous part of the situation that we've been in because, one, Putin has painted himself into a corner. He has very few friends. His country is unhappy. The people are unhappy with the call-up. They've had up to perhaps as many as 300,000 men try to leave Russia. Right. Some of the Russian men have broken their own bones in order to avoid having to go and fight. And they are reporting from Ukraine that they have been ordered to kill civilians. They don't want to do it. Their heart's not in it. The Ukrainians' heart is in it. And so now you have a situation where President Putin, we don't know who would take over if there was to be someone else. Like the devil you know is sometimes better than the one that you don't. But I also believe that President Biden, he's being as strong as he possibly can there, I suppose. But I've long thought that you have to ask, is Europe going to save itself? Is Europe willing to save itself? And we can be there as well, and Biden can say that. But who is the face of this fight for the Europeans, and who will step up, and who will that be? They have a lot of economic problems that they're dealing with. They're looking at a huge energy crisis this year, and they also are timid. Some of them are timid in actually getting the commitments of the weapons to the Ukrainians. I'll point to Germany in particular. So I think that one of the things that Biden can do, at least behind the scenes, he needs to press the Europeans to be more willing to step up and be the face of this there, so that Putin doesn't think this is just a war with the United States. This is a war that he chose, and that the Ukrainians decided to fight back. You know, they got a choice too. And we're in this situation because the Ukrainians have done very well. But at this moment, we are probably in a more dangerous zone than we've ever been since February.
Jesse, what do you think of that? And also the fact that this morning President Zelensky signed the paperwork to fast-track their application to NATO.
That'll get rejected, but I spoke to people, too, and they're saying the same thing that Dana's sources are saying. Putin's only speaking to about 6 people, I'm told, and he demands that they lie to him. So he's not getting an accurate picture of what's happening on the battlefield. And there is no way that we're going to settle on Vladimir Putin's terms. He has killed 250,000 civilians. He has kidnapped about 1 million Ukrainians. You think he's just going to say, all right, let's negotiate. We're going to keep the East and we'll just use Ukraine as a buffer. U.S. policy and European policy towards Russia right now is the complete and total destruction of Russia. They are going to, with the Ukrainians, they are going to expel all Russian forces from Ukraine. They will demand repayment to rebuild everything in Ukraine. There will be a war crimes tribunal to hold all of these people accountable for the massive civilians that they've slaughtered. You're not just going to invade this country, commit atrocities, and then walk away after destroying the entire international supply chain, destroying the energy markets in Europe. You got to be kidding me. So, I mean, this is the guy is going to lose this, and it's not looking good.
Will he use nukes?
Well, certainly there's the growing possibility and potential of an escalation or, at the very least, a tactical nuclear strike. To Dana's point, we, as I say the West, we, Europe and the United States, we have not starved Putin of money or manpower. Yep. Europe can help out by opening up the countries to all of the Russians and Russian men who are trying to get away from Vladimir Putin, take them in, draft dodgers, make them refugees, open their doors. There are a lot of countries who are refusing to do that or dragging their feet on that. But also, we haven't done really anything to bankrupt Putin's regime. We're not willing, the politicians aren't willing to risk a recession, but a nuclear conflict somehow is a risk worth taking. That's where we are. We need to drive down the price of natural gas and oil, and that does mean more supply, but it also means crushing and crippling demand like it happened during COVID. We have not done that. We are actually doing the exact opposite to drive up demand for fuel. California is getting ready to send checks to half the people in the state. Oh, because of the high gas prices, you need more money. No, that doesn't hurt demand. And then over in Europe, just to name one, Britain is capping household energy bills. So you can use as much energy as you want, and anything in excess of the cap, we're just going to send money to Vladimir Putin. That is irretrievably moronical.
Greg?
I was confused when President Biden said it was NATO territory.
Because they're not.
It's because I think that Putin is threatening NATO countries with the war.
That doesn't make sense to me. It's a sham annexation. Nobody's taking it seriously. I never heard of these places 10 months ago. I do know that our country right now, we're going through some very, very serious times. We just talked about the crime. We have inflation. Our economy is in the pooper. And it's like all that's changing with this is that we just keep sending billions and billions and billions of dollars there. And all we're doing is we're not affecting the outcome. We're affecting the duration. So all we're doing is making it longer, but we have a sense that we know how it's going to end. There is no way Putin is going to give in. And he doesn't care about his people. And speaking of people, there's a generation gap there. Half the people are pro-Putin. I mean, more than half the people are pro-Putin. Older generations like him because he's been around. Maybe they've been brainwashed. The younger people, they're leaving. Yep. So I don't think he has any reason to worry. So we're at this point where I feel like the Republicans and the Democrats are in agreement in terms of war, but not in terms of peace. And this is where my crazy idea is that it would be really nice to see somebody like Trump and an Obama together doing something together and trying to help negotiate some kind of peace. It's impossible. It's absurd. It's a crazy idea, but it's not as crazy as thinking, men can get pregnant. No. So if you want to laugh at the idea of like two presidents diametrically opposed coming together, Trump calling him, if Obama doesn't call him back, that's not a good sign. If they call and they go, look, maybe we can talk, I could talk to Putin, you could talk to Zelensky, we do it. If you think that's crazy, then what ideas do you have?
So forget what I said about your birth certificate. I'll apologize for spying on your campaign. We'll fly to Europe and do a deal.
Exactly. But every single cop buddy film, they always win at the end. even when they hate each other. Lethal Weapon, 48 Hours.
No way they're going to ride in the same car, though. And they're taking their own planes.
The point is, nobody is talking about a negotiation. Nobody's talking about off-ramps. And I think there might be an off-ramp with when the oligarchs see their money truly threatened and they're getting killed. Oligarchs are getting killed. There might be an exit strategy that they create for Putin the way they did with Yeltsin, right? Where you say, look, your guarantees you get to keep all your money. We're not going to kill your Secretary of Defense. We're not going to kill anybody, but you're going to get to go. And then they but they have to make it look like he won something. Maybe the Donbass. Maybe that's what they give him, and then they can. But
they're not giving him anything.
I know, and that's why we're going to keep giving him billions, and the outcome will be the same: a destroyed country, Ukraine.
It is interesting, though, because it seems like Zelensky is the one who's the most hardened to the negotiation, because he said, I'm never going to do it with him.
Well,
so
exactly.
He was for a negotiation
originally,
in March.
But a lot of people have died
but
since
Putin wasn't for that, so remember that, too.
Mm-hmm. We solved nothing. We solved nothing.
No, we did.
It was good.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.